The PS2 era, very like the PS1, was a very experimental time with the development of video games that saw many ideas come to light, with some that were definitely highly scrutinised and some even being left to the wayside due to different narratives and themes surrounding the games. While they would get releases in some countries, some other regions just wouldn't appeal to them at all because they questioned a lot of different narratives, agendas and topics that people would not have been comfortable even trying to answer back then. Same can pretty much be said today, but you don't see a lot of games like that trying to do that. If anything, indie game developers will try to work on those concepts, but they still won't touch certain scenarios. But back during the PS2 era, that was definitely a thing. And you would see one of these games under the name of Rule of Rose come to light in probably more ways than you would expect, as it is a survival horror game that takes much of its inspiration off games like Resident Evil, but even more of the psychological elements of Silent Hill and even Haunting Ground that were released previously on the console and even earlier on the PS1, that utilises fixed camera perspectives, but everything is within 3D. It has some excellent graphics and visuals and some really deep, dark, psychological themes that surround the many environments that you'll find yourself in. With the game being set in England in the 1930s, that revolves around the plot of a 19-year-old teenager under the name of Jennifer, who ends up being trapped in a world surrounded by young girls who have established a class hierarchy that call themselves the Red Crayon Aristocrats. But they are psychotic in their nature and they get involved with very tricky and very unusual concepts that revolves them around conducting rituals and trying to even kill people and to intimidate people in order to get what they want. But as Jennifer gets caught up in this scenario, you find that the people you're surrounded by are psychologically and mentally unstable, so you try to find a way out if at all possible, but every time you try to find a way out you keep being drawn back into the madness, which further unveils the plot of the story. And this is one of those games, like I said at the start of the video, that questions a lot of moral topics and ideas and agendas that were considered very squeamish and that weren't really considered a main thing back in those days. Like I said, a lot of regions just didn't want the game due to various standards, but the game still did get a release in other parts of the world, mind you in limited quantities. So when it released in 2006, it was relatively unknown for the most part, but over the years people have become more familiar and aware of this concept, as again it does discuss a lot of those themes, but the fact is that it has survival horror elements surrounding it that have been influenced by classics of old definitely makes it more appealing. While many would say that it's not the best of this style of game, which it probably isn't to that degree, but like I said, it questions a lot of ideologies, but it also is very experimental for what it tries to do, and that for those reasons alone makes it even more interesting and intriguing for many gamers or even collectors. But in saying that, probably what this game is most remembered for is its overall price, as this is one of the most expensive games that you can find out in the video game or retro game wilderness. Like, copies of this game can go up to the hundreds if not even thousands. If you're trying to be an avid collector, it might be one of those games that will probably remain out of reach for many, as it's just so expensive. And it really comes down to its limited numbers, as this game wasn't heavily publicised due to all the reasons that we talked about. But it will be interesting to see if anything ever comes to light in the future with regards to any possible future entries in the series or even a possible remake. But again, when we look at the way the world is today, I'm not going to say too much, but there's a lot of questions around a lot of different things and the way people behave and how they think, and something like this probably won't add well to it, because if they didn't like it then, they probably won't like it now. But it is what it is. Only those that appreciate these classic survival horror games will understand the concepts behind them. Yes, they do discuss very debatable topics and scenarios, but at the end of the day it's a video game, and it was an idea and it was experimental for what it tried to do. While it's not considered as the best survival horror game in its class, which it probably isn't, but like a lot of these games, they all tried ideas that we would now see in the modern day, because if games like this didn't exist, the concepts and the gameplay mechanics that we now see in a lot of modern games, especially with indie games, they probably wouldn't even be a thing. Like, this game is probably remembered for all the wrong reasons, because with its limited quantities it was also banned because of the content that surrounded the game. But then when we think about it, like, you look at games like Resident Evil, Silent Hill, like, they discuss a lot of unusual themes. Even if you look at the likes of Manhunt, which is definitely out there, but yet that was also surrounded by controversy, and it's still even referenced even today. So even just going back to the game briefly, with the concept of the story, as you play as Jennifer, you will be tasked with trying to not only escape, but you will also be forced into conducting various tasks and objectives that you must complete in order to try and get one step further to your goal, which is to escape. But you also have to try and make sure that you don't bring too much attention to your character, pretty much by trying to do your own thing, because all of the other characters and girls that are around you will will quickly pick up on what you're trying to do if they think that you're trying to act out a character as such in many ways. But even with that, the game does give you access to a variety of different types of weapons, from knives to like some melee based combat. Even you do get access to like guns and so forth later on, which you will need in order to defeat a variety of different characters. But it does have the typical survival horror elements with the likes of retreating and backtracking in order to solve puzzles, find items that'll help you to either heal or to use against enemies. You will always have to be mindful of your surroundings, and the fact is that it uses old school fixed cameras with tank controls will definitely add more nerving and unsettling elements to the experience. Because make no mistake, this isn't an easy game to master, it's quite tough, and a lot of the puzzles that are involved aren't as noticeable in the beginning. If anything, you will be left stumped because you don't really know what to do, and sometimes the game doesn't give you enough information in regards to specific elements that's needed to complete the puzzle, so you will be left trying to figure things out for a long time. But it's an interesting game all the same. It's definitely one I think worth looking into. Now, if you can manage to afford it and you're a collector, then it is what it is. But for the rest of us, emulation will more than likely be your best alternative to gain access to play this game. Now, I will admit it won't be for everybody, but true survival horror fans will definitely be able to understand this and get something out of it. If you like dark, gritty tones and unsettling themes, this game will have that. It definitely does. And the fact is that it has got really good graphics as well for its time makes it even more apparent with regards to the experiences that you'll witness. But with that being said, I would love to know your thoughts of Rule of Rose for the PlayStation, and what did you think of it overall? Is this a game that you managed to play back in the day, or is it something that you would be interested in playing? If you're a fan of survival horror, then be sure to share it in the comments below. And if you would like to see more content around more games like this that were also released on the PlayStation 2, then be sure to leave a like on the video, and you can check out this playlist here on screen to see a lot more of those games in action. And I will see you all in the next one.